Be careful.
He's and Scott Higgins, both of them coked up out of their minds.
Listen to you. He's down in the basement. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
I think we should call this the Acement.
The Acement, yes.
Yeah, what do you think there, huh?
I like that. The Acement Studios.
Excuse me, I'm drinking beer. Hold on a second.
We usually drink bourbon on our end.
Yeah,
when we
right.
do the podcast, so
That's all right.
feel free to enjoy yourself.
Yeah, exactly. You shoot an 8-ball if you want. We don't care, as long as it's good stories.
Welcome to the Acement, everybody. It's time to go behind the funny. This is Scott Higgins.
And I am Ace Aceto, and I'm not giggling this week.
It was perfect. Nailed it. Wow. That was timing is dead on. We finally
amazing.
Polishing this stuff up. I
know.
Love it.
Trying.
Thank you so much for joining us once again live. We are so excited you guys are on once again. Remember, for this month, the month of June, we are broadcasting on Facebook Live as well as our original channel, twitch.tv. Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling. After the month of June, that is where you can find us. And before we get going, we would like to thank our unofficial sponsor, Jefferson's Bourbon, the bourbon that keeps the Behind the Funny podcast train rolling along.
Yes, it does.
The smooth sipping bourbon. Tonight, we are finishing up our bottle of their Reserve, which is one of their more premium brands, but you can enjoy any of their bourbons, from the small batch to the Reserve, all the way up to the Ocean, and many, many more. Check them out. They are a great, great company, a great bourbon. You can't go wrong.
Yeah.
And
the other thing that we have to thank our audience about is the reviews that have been coming in. Fantastic. We have to thank you. As you know, if you give us a 5-star written review this month, we will put you in a drawing for a Behind the Funny hoodie or Live from the Acement hoodie, whichever one you want. So thank you so much for the reviews, and let us know. I mean, there's some people watching right now between Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling, which again, we are on Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling channel every week, Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. And that is on twitch.tv /Drinks, Jokes, the letter N, Storytelling. For this month, we have been broadcasting over on Facebook Live as well, just to try and let people know, hey, we're here, and we're over on twitch.tv. So starting in July, we'll just be on Twitch. But it is free to get Twitch. It's free to be on it, and you can actually watch it on your TV as well. So thank you guys so much for the 5-star reviews. And let's see, Kevin, love it, boys. Hold on, let me put these things up. I think let me figure this shit out. Yeah. So Kevin's watching, love it, and he's saying check out my podcast. All right. Yeah,
way to sneak it in, Kevin.
Sneaky. All right. Yeah. So his wondering if you would come on my show for an interview. Yeah, we'd be happy to. Absolutely. So message us later on in the show, and we'd love to come on your show. So,
but if you want to interact with us, go to twitch.tv, Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling while our show is live, and you can interact with us live there. And it is just a free channel to go on and watch.
Just like our friend Jen. Hey, Ace and Scott, love the show. Thanks, Jen.
Always good to have you aboard.
We actually got Jen drinking Jefferson bourbon as a result.
She tried it. She's hooked. The hook is set.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Seriously, we're so excited, and I know we say it every week, but we are so excited this week because if you remember back a couple of episodes ago, maybe about 10 episodes ago, we had the very funny Mike Bent, who's a professor at Emerson College, professor of comedy. He was one of those original Ding Ho comics from the early Boston comedy scene, and he was talking about he and this guy were the two youngest people who came out of the Ding Ho, and we're so excited to have him on because for the past I don't even know how many years he has had a combined 20 appearances between the Conan O'Brien show and the Tonight Show and Late Night with David Letterman.
Correct. Yeah.
So he is a seasoned comic, but more recently he's actually been one of the writers on the Conan O'Brien show and has most recently been the head monologue writer for Conan O'Brien. And we hear that he may be looking for some work. So this is a job interview for this guy as well. So if anyone, any producers are out there, you definitely want to get this guy. But we're so excited to welcome old friend of mine who I loved working with back in the day. Please welcome Mr. Brian Kiley to the podcast. Brian,
good to see you
welcome,
guys.
man.
How are you, buddy?
We're doing good. Thanks so much for being on. We really, really appreciate it.
Happy to do it. You kidding?
So yeah, I mean, so when Mike Bent was on, he was saying that you guys were like those original, Ding Ho comics, and you guys were the youngest ones. How old were you when you started doing stand-up?
I think I was just turning 20.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was a junior at Boston College.
Okay.
And I would do Lenny Clark's show once a week. And, I was so nervous. Lenny had a show Wednesday at the Ding Ho, and every Tuesday around noon, I got a knot in my stomach for like a day and a half.
Just in preparation.
That had to be intimidating walking in that room with some of the comics that were getting on that stage every week.
Oh, and not only were there so many great comics, after a certain point, the room was just out of control. So you had also, it was it became mayhem after a certain point, and it went on like by around 10:30 or 11 they had enough, and then the show went on until 12:30. So
right. You're begging Lenny, can I go on at 8:25?
Yeah. Oh, but what an incredible talents to work with. I was so lucky. I didn't, you don't realize how much you're learning from them just watching, you know what I mean?
Right.
Until you see other comics who are bad and you go, oh, that would never fly at the Ding Ho or whatever,
Right. But now, and obviously at that time you didn't know, no one was a name. You didn't know anyone was going to be that big. You were just, having fun hanging out, not really knowing how far they were going to go until who was the first one that broke? Was it Stephen Wright?
Yeah. I think that he, and I had seen him, I'd seen him perform and I got to perform with him and I thought he was hilarious. I thought he was brilliant. And then the Tonight Show people, the guy who booked the Tonight Show was in town on a college tour with his kid.
Yep.
And came to the Ding Ho and loved Wright and called. And so it was a big deal, in that time where the Johnny Carson show was just huge.
Everything, right.
So, and I remember, I don't think it was for his first set, but I remember his second or third set, we all watched in the back room at the Ding Ho. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty cool. You know?
Did you guys know there was someone from the Johnny Carson show there watching you guys, or did he kind of sneak in kind of quietly?
I think he said he was going to be there. Yeah. So, I mean, I wasn't at that level to go on in front of him, but I don't quote me, but I think they knew, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you, Brian, now is comedy something that, as you were growing up and you were younger, you're like, I want to do this someday? Or is it something that kind of your friends said, hey, you got to go try this. You're pretty funny. You're witty, type of thing, or,
No, I've always loved comedy and I wanted to get into, I would say by the time I was 12, I was like, I didn't know how to become a comedian. I didn't know how people did that because when I was a little kid, they didn't have comedy clubs. Or if they did, I hadn't heard of them,
Right.
But I loved comedy, and it would be the kind of thing where there'd be a comedian on Mike Douglas or Merv Griffin or something.
Right.
And, I'd be outside playing or playing in the basement or something, and my mother would be like, Brian, there's a comedian. So I'd come up and watch it. But I remember, I would read joke books and write, I used to watch the Dick Van Dyke Show, and I was like, oh, you know what? That's what I want to do. Because I knew
when they were all in the writer's room.
Absolutely. And I knew, because I didn't know how people went about becoming a comedian, but I knew that I knew people were writing comedy, sitcoms. So I was like, that's a job. So that's the job I'd like to have.
And we talked about that before, that, at career day at school, there was the firefighter, there was the cop, there was the accountant,
the lawyer.
But nobody came in and said, you can go tell jokes for a living.
Right.
We saw these people on those shows, like you said, same thing when we were growing up. There was no internet. We couldn't Google how to be a comedian.
Sure.
I'd watch Buddy Hackett on TV or Jonathan Winters, and I'd be like in awe of these guys, but I had no concept of how they got there and how you do that.
Yes. We used to watch the Dean Martin roasts.
Oh my God. I've been watching those lately on Amazon Prime. One, they could never be on TV nowadays.
No.
They are so hilarious.
Right. So you said that you started doing it when you were in Boston College.
Mm-hmm.
So what made you get up on stage that first time? And where was it? Was it the Ding Ho?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So as a teenager, I started writing jokes, and I would put them on I had note cards with jokes on them, and I had one of my mother's recipe boxes with my jokes,
with the jokes in it. Yeah. That little file card box.
Yeah. And I was 15 or 16, whatever, 14, writing these just in case I needed them someday. So.
Good thing you did.
Yeah, right.
And I'm sure they were terrible. Like if I saw them now, I'd be like, "Oh my God!" But you have to start somewhere.
But you could punch them up now.
Hope. Could you imagine if they was like, "Oh, these are much better than the jokes I write now"?
Conan, you bring them out literally next week, and Conan's like, "You've been hiding these all these years? What the hell?"
I peaked early, as it turns out. So and then when I was, I don't know if I was a freshman or a sophomore. There was a comedy show at my school, and Barry Crimmins was on, and I thought he was hilarious. So when I talked to him, and I said, "Hey, I want to be a comedy writer." Blah blah. So he was running the Ding Ho. So I met him one afternoon, I typed up a bunch of my jokes and I brought them, and he kind of critiqued them, and he was like, "Oh, you can't make any money in Boston writing comedy. You have to go on stage." And I was like, "Oh, I could never do that."
Right.
And then he let me come to the Ding Ho, and I would come on a date, or I'd come with a buddy, or I'd come by myself, and I would go, once every couple of weeks and just sit in the back and watch the show. And during the summer, I took a comedy class at Emerson College.
Okay.
And it was taught by Dennis Leary.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. So we were writing sketches and we were writing scripts, and we did stand-up in the class. And the last class, they had us invite people in, and people came in and whatever. And they were like, "Hey, you should pursue this." So I went to the open mic at the Ding Ho the next week, and Crimmins had me hosting. So it kind of had a nice, just coincidence,
way to get in. Yeah,
absolutely. Because he and I had known each other, and he was my first contact in comedy, and then he gave me a good spot and a good intro, and also, and the first night it went great. It was like, oh my God, this is magical.
Yeah.
I went back the next week, and I think I got on Lenny's show at 12:15 or something, and it was like, oh boy,
yeah,
crashed and burned.
Right.
And I would kind of bomb every other time. I went back the next week and had a good set. And then, I would sort of bomb every other time. And I also did this thing in the beginning where I'd be bombing, but then I'd make an ad lib that would get a laugh. A joke about bombing, And then when I started doing well, I still had those jokes where I'd put in those jokes about bombing, and the crowd's like, Axel,
what's he talking about? Right.
I'm so conditioned to doing them. It was like, oh, I wasn't expecting laughter here.
Right. Yeah. Why are you blaming us? We're laughing. What's wrong with you?
Exactly.
You turn the crowd against yourself.
Right. Right. Wow.
So, but that's not bad in the beginning to be batting 500. Let me tell you.
No, not at all.
First start.
No.
That's not too bad.
Because we all know those guys that literally bombed for 20 times in a row, yet still had the balls to get up on stage.
Yeah.
And some of them eventually got better. Some of them really just didn't.
Some are still bombing now.
Some are still bombing now, 30 years later, you know?
But we also knew the guys, like, there were a couple guys like Bill Burr and Jimmy Dunn and a couple people that just seemed to be good right away. And
natural. Yeah.
You know, and the audience just liked them, and they kind of had a sense of who they were. Like, I think it took me a while to figure out what worked for me and my persona and whatever.
Your voice.
Absolutely.
Voice.
Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think for most of us, it takes a little while.
And that's what I was going to say. It takes a little while for all of us to really find our voice. You know, I did a lot more impressions in the beginning, and it was, you know, it's because, you know, to your point, when we drink, I say to your point. I say to your point all the time. So we drink whenever we do.
It's become a drinking game.
Drinking game now.
Nice.
But when you were saying it, you know, growing up, I was watching guys like Rich Little, guys like Fred Travellina.
Sure.
I don't even know if Fred Travellina is even a household name, if anyone knows, but he was like, I thought he was a better impressionist than Rich Little. So growing up, that's who I was watching. And so I just built my act around all these impressions. And then I kind of was like, all right, Charlie Hall, you know, was the one that pulled me aside and said, listen, impressions are always going to do well, but you want to write original material as well. Because when I first got up on stage, I was just doing lines from movies. I was acting out scenes from movies, you know. I'm doing Dudley Moore and Arthur, you know, and that was it.
And I think, not to interrupt you, I'm sorry, but I think a lot of us, when we started, were more concentrating on the performing, and the writing came later. I know it did for me. Is I kind of got into comedy, you know, by telling my friends. I'd memorize comedy albums and go tell my friends all the jokes.
Right.
So to me, I didn't write the stuff. I just made sure I performed the joke the right way for everybody.
Right.
Well, you bring up a good point, because I think people kind of come into it either your
different ways.
Yes, either your strength is performing or your strength is writing.
Right.
You know, we tend to, you know, I would do sets for my first few years, and I'd come off and people like, you're a very good writer. We're just like, well, I wasn't handing out copies of my.
I didn't say, okay, here, read this and get back to me. Right.
So it was such a left-handed compliment of like, oh, that's not really, you know.
That's not what I was looking for.
But we also saw guys that had great presence or great performers, but their material was sort of lacking, you know. So
right.
Yeah.
And then we've talked about it before. Like, one of the guys I've reached out to be on here, and we just haven't figured out a date. But like, I remember working with Jonathan Groff, and I remember seeing similar. Wow, that guy's a great writer, but he was very, you know, kind of low key on stage.
Yeah.
But his material was ridiculously killer.
He's
you know,
smart guy. Oh my God, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's like, you know, I say, oh yeah, I used to work with this guy, Jonathan Groff, and they're like, the guy from Hamilton, and I'm like, no, different guy. He's a writer. That guy's an actor. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I mean, Groff was the head writer for Blackish and head writer. Yeah, he's had a great career. Unbelievable. And a great guy. Great guy.
So you started in Boston. When did you decide to move out west? Did you already have a job secured, or did you go out like?
I was in Boston forever, and then and even when I started Conan, I still lived in Boston. I would go back and forth because, well, for a couple of reasons. One, you know, my wife was a VP of a company in Boston.
Okay.
And she was making more than me. And people are like, well, why don't you move to New York? It's like, well, actually, I should be, you know.
I should be moving wherever she wants me to.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works. And I only had 13-week contracts. And then when we did move to New York, when her job ended, you know, we were there for several years, and then Conan came out with West, so that's when I came out here. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you were already on the show, and then just moved when you went out there.
Yeah. So I've been with him 27 years. The show.
Wow.
The show ends a week from today. So
I know. I saw your post today.
I'm like, I have to say.
I was like, oh man, I wish I had money to pay him, because he could he could produce this show and write for us, but we could only give him some Jefferson's bourbon. That's about it.
Yeah, that's a move up.
Plus, he'd have to move. He'd have to move back too. That sucks.
Now, how did you get started with Conan?
Well, so I after college, I just went right into stand-up, and I was kind of lucky because the boom happened at that time.
Right.
Yep.
And, we were able to do, not only is able to do shows every night, you could do a half hour every night.
Right.
You might be up in Maine at a bar. The next night you might be in Connecticut at a college. Then you're at a club in, at a comedy club. So you were working all these different kinds of places, but, getting a half hour a night as opposed to 5 minutes a night of being an open micer or whatever, you're just getting a ton of stage time. So,
right.
And then I started doing a lot of, I started doing a lot of topical jokes. So I'd get the newspapers and pre-internet.
Yeah.
You just write jokes in the paper, and I would do them in like the first half of my act. And when Conan started, they were looking for somebody to write his monologue, and they contacted me. There was a couple Boston comics working there.
Mm-hmm.
And they contacted me and said, hey, why don't you submit? So I typed up some jokes that I'd been doing in my act.
Yeah.
And then I wrote stuff, those couple days. And I got some stuff on just from, the newspaper that day or whatever.
Right. So, topical stuff.
Yeah. So I sent a packet, and they liked it. And they said, okay, you start tomorrow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Now
who were the comics that were working there?
Yeah.
Was it Louis
It
and
was Louis C.K.
yeah,
and Tom Agna and Chuck Sklar.
okay. All right.
Now that's got to be, because I think about guys that work on, like a Bill Burr that'll work on his hour of material for a year and then tape it. Louis C.K. does similar type of things. A lot of these guys do. You got to come up with material every day.
Yeah.
That's something that at first it's got to be, you got to feel that pressure a little bit to come up with material every day. And then now that you've been doing it 27 years, obviously that's a muscle that you've exercised, and you can do it a lot better than you used to. But in the beginning, that had to feel like pressure.
Yeah.
Well, in the old days, I would try to write like, say, 5 jokes for my act every day. And if I did with the newspaper, maybe 10, But getting in there, and some days you go, I can't think of anything, and you just go do something else, I can't think of anything. It's like, well, go think of something.
Yeah, exactly.
We go live. We go live pretty soon.
We don't have that luxury. So, and then I was writing 30 or 40 jokes a day, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize I could
do
keep
this
going like that.
Right.
I would spend maybe an hour a day, and then to go and spend 5 hours a day, it was like, whoa.
Right.
That's because I've always been kind of in awe of writers on shows like that you could come up with that type of stuff, because I've never been a comic that can just, okay, I'm gonna go write new jokes.
Right.
I have to have the germ of an idea, and then I can flesh it out and come up with things from there. But to just say, okay, I punch in at 9 and go to work, and I got to come up with stuff.
Right.
That's a different skill set.
Well, you know what's funny too, and I don't know if you've ever written for sitcoms. There have been times where I'm watching a show like a comedy, and I'm saying the next line before they're saying it. I'm like, holy shit, I guess I could do this,
Absolutely. And I think the hardest part about writing on a late night show is because it's every night, it's a lot of pressure. I think the not burning out is the hardest part.
Yeah.
I think that there's been a lot of great writers who, after a couple of years, are like, oh, I can't just sit in a room and think. It's like,
yeah,
I know what you mean, but when you have kids and stuff, you don't have that luxury of like, I'm gonna see what's out there, or whatever.
I don't feel like doing this anymore. Yeah, right. Yeah, like, oh shit, I got college bills to pay for.
They feel like having food and shelter. So
yeah,
they're kind of fussy like that.
Yeah. So that was the kind of thing of, you don't have the luxury to be burned out. You just got to go the next day and do it again,
Right. So does it ever get like, especially like obviously the past 4 years, or 5-6 years with the political landscape, did it get tiring? Because it was like, did you feel at any point it's like, oh my God, it's the same old stuff? I mean, obviously the stuff was being written for you in some cases.
Right.
But did it get tiring at times?
Yes. And even... And Conan would talk about Trump fatigue, where there were times where it's like, hey, you know what? let's not talk about them today. Let's talk about something else,
Right. Just to take a break so you're not fatiguing. Yeah.
And you can see the audience like, good, because we're sick of talking about this all day.
Right.
So yes, that definitely happens. And the funny thing with your act is, if you write a great joke about going to high school, you can just keep doing that night after night for years.
Right, because it never gets old because everyone's going to high school and you're bringing them back to that.
Absolutely. And this is, you might have a great joke about the president, and then the next day they want another one. And you're like, well, what about that one I wrote yesterday?
Right. That's actually one of the things, like when people ask me, oh, do you do jokes about this? And I'm like, my act is really about me growing up, because I want to bring people along, because I want to find that commonality that we all had when we were kids, because that is going to still be relevant 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So when I write, that's what I'm trying to write about, being a kid, the TV shows we watch, things like that. And that's why it's funny, as I mean, I'm sure we all get bored with our act, but I'm still doing the Davy and Goliath joke because people are still laughing at it. People our age still get it, Yeah.
And it means something to you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it depends. There's some people, they want to just talk politics all day. And it's like, what? Go then do that. Do political comedy then. If it's not your passion, though, I'd much rather talk about my kids talk about George W. Bush or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that has to be your passion. It's funny. Last week we had Jimmy Tingle on, who's a great political comic.
Sure.
But that's his passion. That's what he gravitates towards.
Absolutely.
And that's where his writing goes from, So it makes sense. But not everyone's like that.
No. And also Tingle puts the time in to do it. You have sometimes people who don't know anything in the type of politics.
Yeah, right. They don't understand politics. He actually understands politics.
And he's been studying it for 30 years for 8 hours a day. So absolutely,
No, you're right about the fatigue thing. I did a fundraiser recently, and after I closed the show, and at the end of my set, the people came up to me and they're like, "Oh, that was so much fun, thank you." And one guy goes, "I'm so glad you didn't do anything on COVID. I'm so sick of hearing about COVID. Thank you for not doing COVID jokes."
Yeah, because every comic felt that they had to be relevant.
They had to find their angle on COVID and everything, and I just stayed away from it because I was sick of hearing about it.
Yeah.
So I just didn't write anything pertaining to that, because to me, everyone's going to be talking about it. Right. And it was kind of weird that they were coming up thanking me for not talking about something. That was the first time that happened. To me, it was weird.
Yeah.
Because I think, like you said, there's certain things that are just fatigue because people are so beaten over the head with it day in and day out.
Right.
Yeah. And even, I try to tweet a joke every day, and I try not to, you don't want to look back at 6 months and go, what does that joke mean? Do you know what I mean? Because I kind of like the evergreen thing of, this is hopefully a timeless joke that, we can be 10 years from now. And like,
Exactly.
Now, you still obviously do stand up as well as your writing gigs. Do you have a separate set that you do for that stuff, or do you use the stand up to work your stuff for your day job? No.
I very early on decided, because I had been writing topical jokes for my act, and I realized I didn't want that thing of, do I keep this or do I give it to him? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I made a decision. It's like, okay, I'm going to give him all the topical stuff, and I'm just going to write personal stuff for me. So I lost about 25 minutes when I started because I was like, all that first 25 minutes of if I'm doing 45 minutes or 50, that's all gone now, and I had to build it back up again. And it takes a long time.
Right?
Especially if it's evergreen,
Yeah.
But no, I would just do a set about my life. And what would happen is on Conan in New York, sometimes a guest would cancel or miss their flight or something, and they'd be like, "Get out there,"
Oh,
so
really?
I had a suit in my office, and of the 12 times I did it, only once did they say, "Hey, can you do it?" Did they give me a date?
Really? Every other time was last minute?
It was, "Hey, can you do the show tomorrow?" And it's like, and I remember saying, "Well, I've only got 2/3 of a set." And they're like, "Okay, well, you'll be the second guest, and you're whatever." Writing jokes on the train that night to do on TV, where it's like, I hope this works.
Wow. Meanwhile, anyone else being called on a Conan was like working their set for like 10 years to get to Conan, and you're having to write it on the train the night before.
God.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was really insane.
Oh my God.
And you really wanted to do well because you worked there and you had to see people in the hallway the next day. You didn't want people avoiding.
Yeah.
Can you imagine being in the writer's room and you go on as the comic bomb?
And bomb. Yeah.
That's the worst case scenario right there.
Yeah. That sucks.
Facing those people.
Well, when you have to face anyone that you bombed in front of, that happened to me today. Believe it or not, I've told the story. I did a benefit for a community health center in Rhode Island. And it was their 50th anniversary, and they hired me to be the comic. All I had to do was 10 minutes. But the problem was they put me on. There were like 4 politicians that went up and did speeches. Then there was someone else that told a speech. Then there was the band that played during dinner. And then after dinner, they said, hey, we've got a special guest. He's from the Rhode Island Comedy Hall of Fame. Please welcome Ace Aceto. And then they literally go, oh, and by the way, the dessert table is out in the atrium. And 500 people got up and walked out. And there was literally like 50 people left in this like 1,000-seat ballroom. And I called on them today because my job is I'm still doing medical sales. And I said to the nurse, I said, were you at the show a couple of years ago? She goes, yeah, I was there. And I go, oh my God, I don't suck that bad all the time. And she's like, no, I felt so bad. I'm looking at you going, oh my God, this poor kid, he's up there. And she goes, we couldn't even hear in the back of the room. Absolutely. So literally I was playing to like 3 tables up front.
And that's what you want as a comedian, sympathy.
Yeah,
that's what
I know.
But people think it's funny because when I first did Conan, he would do the warm up and he'd come back and sometimes be like, oh, it's a bad crowd. And I want to go, oh, you don't know what a bad crowd is.
Right. All right, buddy.
Like you and I worked rooms where like, oh, we're fearing for our safety here.
Yeah, exactly.
And also you have rooms where it's like no one's paying attention. They don't even know a comic is on. They don't want a comic. Like there are things like that. It's like you might as well be at a bus terminal.
Right. And we did a show in our
just bring that up.
In our first season. We did a show where we had a panel, and it was I don't know if you remember John Parada from Rhode Island.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
He was a Rhode Island guy, but he books a lot of shows. He does a lot of booking. And Mike McCarthy, who started at Periwinkle's, went to Florida. So we had a panel show, and we said, we're going to come up with a list of top 10 things that as a comic, if you walk into a show, it's going to be a bad gig. And we couldn't even narrow it down to 10. We came up with 12 things. And literally what you just said, it was like, the show is a surprise.
Yes.
People don't know there's a comedy show. You're doing it at a sports bar during the Bruins playoffs.
Yeah.
Weddings.
There's kids at the show. It's a backyard barbecue. Like a wedding. Like there's just certain situations that people put comics into.
They're a mile away from you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. The runway. That was the thing with that health center. They had a massive dance floor between me and the tables. It was like
the dreaded dance floor. Oh, absolutely. It's
you're on a stage, but you're playing to people who are 400 feet away from you. Comedy clubs are intimate for a reason. People are right up against the stage for a reason,
The worst setup I'd ever seen for that, I did a benefit in Newton at I think it was an Elks Club or a Knights of Columbus in Newton, and they had a circular dance floor in the middle, and they wouldn't let them put tables on that dance floor.
Of course, they never want you to ruin their.
So they had the tables on the outer circle on the carpet and made us stand in the center of the circle, in the center of it. And it's not a revolving stage like the Cape Cod Musical Theater side.
Nor is it elevated.
You find yourself going like this, like spinning around to try to talk to people.
Yeah. Or they bring out the food, or they
yes.
Or there's oh, by the way, hey, the buffet is open. Here's Brian Kiley, your comic.
Oh, it's just.
I had to record a set one time. In the old days, you had to hire someone to come in and video you.
Yes, and that was the worst. You spend all that money,
and it was always a disaster. And you guaranteed, Yep. And I had to send a tape to the Tonight Show, and I'm doing this benefit. Everyone's dressed up. It's in this nice place. It's going great, and I'm like psyched. And out of the kitchen, 6 chefs with the tall hats and the flaming cakes, and they come and they parade around the stage, and they parade around there, and they go in the kitchen. It was like,
was that on the tape?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. And
you would think they'd want you on the Tonight Show just out of sympathy for what you had to put up with.
I couldn't send that in, but I was like, I was like, because especially it's this couldn't be better, and then it's like, you asshole.
Yeah, be our guest. Be our guest.
Oh,
Brian, I had a comedian ruin.
He knows who it is.
I know. I figured he would ruin a tape I was making to send up to the Portland Comedy Connection to try to get in up there.
Sure.
And I just sent it in with the guy who ruined it still in the tape. And it actually got me in up there. I was at the Kowloon and I'm taping a set and it's going great. And I'm watching my set the next day to make sure sound is good, everything like that. The set's going great. All of a sudden, in the middle of my 25-minute set, Frank Santarelli's face pops into my camera, takes up the entire lens of the camera, and he just goes, nobody's buying any of this shit. And he just slowly lowers himself down out of the camera's view. And I'm like, oh my God, if I cut this out, they're going to see the cut, screw it. I'm sending it in with Frank's face. I get a call from Oliver. He's like, that was great. Santarelli made me laugh so hard. I figured if he likes you, you must be a good guy, and I got booked. So it was like crazy. It just worked out.
That's so Frank. Oh my God.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Totally Frank.
I could just see him doing that. Oh my God.
He just rose up into the screen, said it, and then slowly slinked back down and away.
Well, I don't know if you heard the beginning intro that we had to the show, but there's a point where you hear someone go, how about a hand for Ace Aceto and Scott Higgins? Both of them coked up out of their minds. He said that during the show that we had him on. We were like, oh, we got to add that to the intro. He's just out of his mind. I think he's the only person that was ever on Last Comic Standing where he got booted off the show. He walks up to the camera, right in the camera. He goes, this show is bullshit. And he walks off stage.
And people don't understand what you see on stage is just Frank.
Yeah, it's not even.
There's not a character there. That's just him.
No,
it's yeah.
You must have seen a lot of over the years the guests that were on Conan, some pretty unique people that were pretty interesting. I'm not trying to get you to out anybody that may have been not so nice or anything, but there must have been some people that surprised you that like, oh my God, that guy was funnier than I thought he would be, or
they were weirder than I thought they were going to be.
You would have some great actors who were terrified to go up there.
Mm-hmm.
Like Harrison Ford or Gabriel. It's like,
because unless they're given material, they don't know what to say, right?
But it's like, Harrison Ford doesn't have to say anything. They're gonna love him. They're gonna go crazy.
Right.
So much goodwill. It's like, look, your career is not riding on this set here.
Yeah, this interview, right?
True, good point.
But it's just funny seeing him nervous. And maybe I think a lot of these people that just kind of they're perfectionists or something. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And it's not that their thing or whatever. But it was just funny to see someone like that where it's like, do you have any idea how excited they are that you're here?
Just to see you, right? It doesn't even matter what you say.
Absolutely, So it was kind of interesting to me to see people like that you're like, I think you're going to be fine. I don't know.
Yeah, and they're all nervous, right?
Yeah.
In a way, it's kind of nice that they were kind of humble like that they were so nervous over
makes them
something
real.
like that.
They want to do well and all that stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, who were the guests that were kind of like a wow moment for you that you're like, oh my God, I love this person. I can't believe I'm getting to meet them or they're going to be on the show?
I'll tell you the story because a lot of times I didn't try to meet the guest. It was kind of
course.
You had to kind of pick your spot. Like I love Harrison Ford, but what am I going to say to Harrison Ford? Hey, I'm a fan. It's like
right.
Yeah. You could have this. Everyone could line up all day and tell them they're a fan, and who cares? You know what I mean?
Right.
But when Henry Winkler was on, he had written these children's books. That my kids loved.
Oh,
and
really?
I would read these books with my kids, and I kind of thought, this probably is his sort of passion project. Like this probably like if I went to him and said, hey, the Fonz, hey.
Hey, I have a leather jacket just like you. Yeah.
He'd be like, oh my God, I want to shoot this guy. But I kind of thought this would mean something to him, and I just said, hey, we read your books, every night with my kids, and they love them, and they're laughing, and they're reading them on their own, and it was all that kind of stuff. When your kids are 8 years old and they're reading a book, you're psyched,
Yeah.
And so, unbeknownst to me, he got my name from our producer, and I get in the mail 3 of his books signed to my kids like a week later.
Oh, wow.
So, people always say, who's your favorite guest? I was like, well, it's got to be Henry Winkler.
Henry Winkler, yeah.
Because
that was very thoughtful. He just, he found that out and thought, you know what, this is gonna make.
I think he was psyched that the kids enjoyed his book so much. You know what I mean? And
right.
And he was, just what a great guy to do that.
That's awesome.
Right. He could have just been really nice and said, thank you. That's awesome and everything. And you still would have said what a nice guy he is.
Absolutely. Yeah. That would have been plenty. This was really unexpected. So,
right.
So for me, he was my all-time favorite guest.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's now my all-time favorite Conan guest.
After
that story.
So besides being on Conan, were there any other wow moments in your career? Because obviously, like, you've had a half-hour comedy special, you've done, like, were there moments in your career where you were like,
especially early on, that first moment where you're like, holy shit, I'm truly a stand-up now, this is a wow moment.
Yeah, there were definitely, like, I remember doing a show with Goldthwait and Stephen Wright and giving them a ride home.
Yep.
Oh, can you imagine that ride?
Oh my God. Car and stuff like that. And I was like in college, and I was like, holy shit, I'm making these guys laugh. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, right.
And that was like a huge, like, oh, maybe I can do this kind of thing.
That must have been a hell of a car ride, because those two guys are so totally polar opposites.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. It was, I would have loved to have that. See a film of that now,
That's like the beginning of a joke. Stephen Wright and Bobcat Goldthwait walk into a bar.
And they weren't famous yet, but they were on their way.
They were still themselves. They were still their characters.
It was very soon after that they became famous,
Yeah.
What happened to me was when I was 25, I auditioned for Letterman, and the producer came up to me afterwards and he told me I was very good.
Mm-hmm.
And then they called me to do the show 17 years later.
Wow.
Out of the blue, I'm at work at Conan, and Eddie Brill calls me, and he goes, this is a weird question, but can you do the show today? And I was like, oh. I didn't even know I was in the running. And I don't know how many.
Right. 17 years later.
Absolutely. And I don't know how many people he called before me, but I was like, okay, and I had my suit and
Yep.
So I just went over there, and what happened was Dave got sick. He had shingles.
So get out.
Bruce Willis was supposed to be the first guest, so Bruce Willis had to host. So they needed an extra guest.
An extra person, yeah.
So it was just sort of this fluky thing, and I was nearby and whatever. So I just went and I was like, all right, well, just do your best stuff. And, it's like, so after that, then they would call me. And once again, they didn't give me, until I moved out here.
It wasn't a big notice. Yeah, right.
I was like, hey, can you do the show tomorrow, or that kind of thing. Yeah. But the advantage when I first did it was I didn't have time to be nervous. I got a good night's sleep. I did all, you know what I mean? I didn't know I was going to be on, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I think one of the weirdest moments was I did the show one time, the U2 was on. And they would do a week of U2. So this was last night. And so I get there and they go, we can't give you a dressing room because U2, they're like,
U2 needs all the dressing rooms, right? Yeah.
So Jason Segel was the first guest, and then the 4 of them took up all the dressing rooms. So they're like, we're just going to put you in the green room if you don't mind. So it's fine. So the green rooms are on the first floor where the studio is. Mm-hmm. So after my set, I come off and they go, hey, do you mind if U2, I guess before my set, they go, do you mind if U2 uses your dressing room, which, the green room, before they go on, because instead of having to bring them down the stairs and, whatever, they'd just be right there.
They'll be closer.
Yeah.
Right.
So I said, you tell those Irish no.
Tell them to go back to Ireland.
Of course. So I do my set and I come off and I go in my dressing room, which is the green room, and it's just you two and me.
That is so
That's
surreal.
Not awkward at all.
So incredibly surreal. And they all introduce themselves. Like Bono introduced himself. I think I know who you are.
Yeah.
And then, the Edge is like, hi, I'm the Edge. Nice to meet you, the Edge.
There's nothing else you could say there.
I'm the comic.
Nice guys, and they were setting up for them, the roadies or whatever are setting up, the crew's setting up for their set. So we're in there for 10 minutes, just the five of us.
The five of you.
And we were just kind of talking about our kids and whatever.
Yeah.
Just kind of like dad stuff, you know what I mean? But that had to be the most surreal moment of my career.
Jeez. Talking about kids with you two.
Legends.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was like
legends.
It's like I'm in a room by myself with them. Do you know what I mean? Like it was incredible.
And it's not only that you're in a room with them, they're in your room.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like someone had to ask permission for them to come into your room. Absolutely. So they're being gracious, like, thanks so much for letting us in your room,
Absolutely. And they just seen my set and were commenting on my jokes and stuff. And it was just like, okay, this is
it's surreal, right?
Totally surreal. Absolutely.
That is a pinch yourself moment right there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So just I want to put up a comment because one of our listeners and watchers says that's one hell of a wait for a callback. The 17 years. Jen said, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's true.
That's got to be crazy. So we've asked about wow moments. We always ask our guest about the funny bad gig moment. And anyone it's funny, even when we talk to newer comics who've only been doing it like 6 months or a year, if you've been doing comedy for any more than 6 months, you have at least one of these stories. So the funny bad gig moment is one of those moments where the gig is so bad, it's not funny the night of. It's just horrible. You don't want to be there. You want to give up comedy. But the further away you get from it, you're sitting around in the green room with comics and you're talking about, horrible gigs, and someone will tell their story and you're like, oh, you think that's bad?
This is your one-up war story.
Yeah, I've got one for you.
Well, we're gonna have to be here for a few hours, guys.
That's fine. We got time.
Hey, Brian, just so you know, every year at the end of the year, we do the best of the bad gig stories. It's one of our most popular, most downloaded episodes. So
yeah, and we're in the process of writing a book about all the funny bad gig stories that we've collected from people. So
I have so many. There was one that George McDonald reminded me of not long ago, where he and I had a gig up. First of all, a great guy, George McDonald.
Yeah, I love George McDonald. I reached out to him. I actually reached out to him to be on the show, and he was like, Ace, I haven't done comedy in a really long time. I don't know if I could do any. I'm like, we just want to talk to you, man, because he's so great.
Oh my God, he's the best storyteller. You have to have it. Yeah,
I'm gonna bug him. I'm gonna try and get him.
Childhood stories are unbelievable. But we had a gig, and it was, I think it was Vermont or Maine, but it was 4 hours away. That's what I remember is we had a 4-hour drive, and we get there and they have a sandwich board out front with our headshot. And it said, there's a sign. The sign says, "Ian's ? It's like, like we're being. It's like, wait, you guys are supposed to be on our side here. Like
we're not sure. They may be comedians. We're not sure.
But I used to do the Naughty Pine in Quincy.
Okay.
And they would have me there every 3 weeks because it was like Friday and Saturday. So you were either there Friday night or Saturday, and then 3 weeks later it'd be on another night.
On the opposite night.
And it would be the same crowd, And I'd go into like my high school bit, and they knew my act so well. Like if I dropped a joke, they'd go, hey, you forgot one. No, I got that, but it wasn't really working in that part.
Hey, you forgot the bus stop joke.
Absolutely. And I remember one time the headliner, I don't remember who it was late, so I had to stretch. And I don't have that much material at the time, but I had to keep going. And I ordered a beer on stage because I'm stalling.
Yep.
And I had to pay for the beer in front of the crowd on stage, and just
waitress is like, that's $3.50, sir.
Yeah, and even the crowd was kind of like, oh, like they kind of felt bad for me. You know?
No tabs, sir.
No tabs, sir. Sorry.
But I remember, Paul Kozlowski and I were roommates.
Okay, yeah.
And we had some hell gigs together where there was one, it was a 2-nighter in Vermont at like some kind of a timeshare place.
Yep.
And they're all skiing or something. And so we go the first night and it's the worst, just abysmal.
Yeah.
So we had to go back the next night. We're staying there and we have to go back on the next night. And it was so bad that we lied about our names the next night.
Hi, I'm Lenny Clark. This is Paul D'Angelo.
Well, I introduced him as Paul's stage name, and I was Brian's pseudonym. And it's like, you know what? We don't want people using our names after.
Yeah, we don't even want them to know who we are. That's my God.
We had one gig where we're at a motel, and it was just it's like we're bombing in this motel lounge. In the middle of the set, he goes, "Excuse me for a second." He goes outside, jumps in the pool, comes out, gets back, and it goes back to the car. So anyway, and they
fully clothed,
and they didn't react at all. He's sitting there, dripping wet
in his full clothes,
not a peep,
nothing. Oh my God!
It's like, what do you have to do to applaud? But
right, yes, or even notice anything, right?
And we did one hell gig one time where I go on, it was torture. He goes on, he's eating it. And about 5 minutes to go in his set, he tosses me his car keys because we drove together.
He said, go start the car.
I start the car. I bring it around out front. He sees the car out front. He calls them every name in the book and runs out and jumps in the back of the car.
Oh my God, that's awesome! You were the getaway car.
I was the getaway.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million of them.
Well, that's the thing. It's like we've talked to even comics who've only been doing it 6 months, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I've got a couple of those."
Well, there was a story with Mike Moto one time who was a Japanese guy.
It's funny. We asked, the reason why we're laughing is because we had Mike McDonald on a couple of years ago, and when we asked him for a funny bad gig story, he goes, "I'm not going to give you one of mine, but I'm going to give you 3 Mike Moto."
Okay, so he did the suicide one.
No.
He didn't do the suicide one?
No, he did the one where the cop caught him doing coke before the show.
Yeah, that's a great one.
No, but what's the suicide one? This is great. We're going to have a whole chapter on Mike Moto, and we haven't even talked to him.
The one, what was the one I was going to tell was he got into it. He got into it like he didn't like John Wayne because John Wayne was always bashing the Japanese and whatever. He's always in these World War II movies where he's talking about the nips and the Japs. Yeah. So he did this bit, and this Marine got really mad and charged the stage. And Moto was holding him off with the mic stand, like keeping him
He was pushing him back.
So the waitress runs into the green room, and the comics, they have no idea. And she runs into the green room. She goes, "They've got one of your guys." What does that even mean? Like, they got
one of your guys, right?
Like, what does that? What are you talking about?
What does that mean? They're holding him hostage?
Yeah, I get, and so they come down there, and they had to like get him, try to break up this fight here with this guy, trying to beat up Moto. The suicide one is they were doing a show on a pier, like in Nahant or someplace like that.
Yep.
And it's a restaurant, and there's a big bay window. And he's doing his set, and you see this car pull up, and this guy gets out, and he goes to the trunk, and he takes out a hose from the trunk, and he attaches it to the tailpipe, and he brings the hose around. Did Mike McDonald didn't tell this story?
I think he did. Now that you're saying it,
so familiar.
I think he did.
The hose in so the whole audience is like, "Holy cow!" this guy is trying to commit suicide during Moto's set.
Right. Yeah, I think he did. But you know what it is? That was only like the first or second story that McDonald told.
Oh, yeah.
So then he told the one about doing the coke and getting caught by the cop and having to beg to say,
and
listen,
the cop let
I'm
him
the
do his
comment.
set.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the last story. So we forgot about the suicide one. That was
Yes.
Well, one of my favorite ones.
God.
There was a gig one time that Don Gavin was doing it with Tommy Gilmore, some road gig.
Yep.
And Gilmore, so Gavin shows up to the gig and he goes in the men's room and Gilmore's at the urinal. And Gavin goes over and leans over his shoulder and looks at him and goes, "You call that a dick?" And the guy turns and it's not Tommy Gilmore.
It wasn't Oh my God.
An audience member. And Gavin was like,
it's the only time Gavin's ever been speechless, right?
It was the first time. He's such a quick-witted guy, and he was like, he was just mortified.
Awesome.
I just got to go out and perform with that guy in the crowd.
With that guy in the crowd.
It's the guy that's checking out my dick at the urinal. Like,
oh my God.
Oh, I can't imagine Gavin speechless.
I know. Neither can I.
oh, it's.
My
you don't
God.
have to about it. I was dying when you told me that.
There's 1,001 stories like that.
And that's the thing. That's why we love. That's one of our favorite questions because everyone has so many different stories like
Absolutely. And when you're in the green room, any comic that's talking about how he did the show and it was great and I killed or whatever, it's like you don't want to hang out with that guy. You want to.
No, exactly.
I had to do a show at a funeral and. You know, they chased me out of there and whatever. You know what I mean?
Or you do the fundraiser and they have the memorial slideshow before you go up and then they're crying and they go, and now here's Brian Kiley to make us laugh.
I guess we could all use some laughs now. So we're going to bring out the comedian.
Oh, torture.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and you got to turn that
you got to try and turn it around.
Oh my God.
So Brian, obviously, Conan is ending in what, 1 week, 2 weeks?
1 week from tonight.
Yeah.
1 week from today. So I know you jokingly put something up. Have you lined anything up moving forward, or are you looking, or are you, are you looking at coming back to the East Coast, or?
Well, I'm just looking for a gig. I'd love to stay out here if I can, just because it's hard to uproot or anything, but yeah, I'd like to go right on a TV show again, Yeah.
What TV show? What have you done any sitcoms? Like sitcom writing or Punch Up or?
I have been writing just pilots the last few years, so I would love to have to sell a pilot or get on a staff somewhere or something like that would be great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen,
with your resume, I got a feeling that's not going to.
Exactly.
I appreciate you saying that. Let's hope something happens.
And listen,
definitely
with our tens of listeners, listening.
Stop.
Hopefully,
Stop it.
We have thousands of listeners.
Yes,
we do.
We're on pace to knock on plastic. Have our best month we've ever had.
That's great.
Like
that's great. Yeah, we've been. You know what? We see he started this 4 years ago, and just steadily growing. And really, it's just because we're trying to get great guests like yourself, and that's not blowing smoke or anything like that. But we've been very lucky.
Well, you have a fun show and you have a nice chemistry, and I'm sure you're just building your audience week by week. I think
that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. Like I said, I mean, it's funny. We had Paul Barkley on talking about like the origins of Boston comedy, and he was like, "I didn't start Boston comedy. It was Sean Morey, and now we've got Sean coming on next week, and I'm so excited about that. When he said yes, I was like, oh my God, this is like full circle. All these people that talked about the beginning of Boston, and we're both huge fans of When Stand Up Stood Out by Fran Salamita. And I actually reached out to Fran on LinkedIn. I don't know if he checks LinkedIn that often, but I'd love to get him on to talk about, the making of that.
Good for him doing that. To have that thing that we'll always be able to look at,
Exactly.
You look at some of that old footage, like you said, because you hear the stories of the Ding Ho and all those times, and we hear the stories. You were there and you lived it, so you saw it, but we get a chance to see it.
Yeah.
So we live it vicariously through that documentary, and we're like, holy shit, what an amazing time that
and there's no one in this country. I have heard Joe Rogan say it. I've heard multiple people say it. No one, like, Boston breeds killer comics. New England breeds killer comics.
Yeah.
You know, they're just, Rogan says it all the time. They're assassins. Like, it's amazing how many people came out of Boston that are still not very well known, but you put them up against anyone that's nationally known and they would absolutely crush.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great scene. Absolutely. So many great comics,
Yeah.
So awesome. Brian, can't thank you enough for coming on. This was a great conversation, man. And hats off to all your success. And we know you're going to have future success.
Well,
man.
Thanks so much, guys. I love talking to this stuff. So it's fun for me.
So do we. We love this kind of, as Martin Olson said, he was a piano player back at the Ding Ho in the day. We had him on, and he said, that we've accumulated this library of Boston comedy history, and now you're part of it as well. So we're honored that you came on tonight.
I appreciate having me be part of it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys. Brian. We'll see you. Thanks so much, and good luck.
You got it.
We'll talk soon. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
And that was Brian Kiley, everybody.
That was so awesome.
Current head writer at Conan O'Brien.
Yep.
Amazing guy. Just an amazing person, amazing writer, amazing comedian.
And you know what? I remember the days of going to the Comedy Connection and being on a show, and they would be like, hey, Brian Kiley's coming in. He just wants to do a 5-minute set.
Well,
and he was literally running sets for Conan, for the Tonight Show. Like, it was weird because I'd be watching him and I'm like, he doesn't even give a shit if they're laughing. Like, he's just going through because he was trying to do the timing of the jokes, and it was so awesome.
That was the first time I had seen him. It was like a Wednesday night, at the Connection in Boston.
Yep.
And they set the order, and then I forgot. I think
they usually put him up in the middle.
I think Harrison Stebbins was hosting.
Yep.
And I got bumped because I was like third or fourth. And he said, Brian Kiley came in. He's working on some stuff for Conan. So he's going to go on before you. I was like, all right. I guess so. He goes up there with his notepad, his legal pad.
Exactly.
And he does a bunch of jokes.
And you're like, wait a minute. This guy's a headliner. How come he's reading off of jokes? Because he was literally working a set for TV.
And all I could think of is, well, that's not professional. Bring your pad on stage with you.
Yeah, meanwhile,
what the hell do I know?
He wrote those fucking jokes that day. Yeah, that's the thing.
He wrote them probably an hour before he got there.
Exactly.
And it was, again, we even talked about him looking back, not knowing. I didn't realize, just like you didn't realize, at what you were watching at the time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, like he said, he didn't realize Stephen Wright and Bobcat Goldthwait were going to be huge. He just knew they were talented guys. Same with us. We knew Brian was talented. We just didn't know where he was going. And then when I heard, he's the writer on Conan and all that other stuff.
I know I said it earlier, but can you imagine a car ride
with Stephen Wright and Bobcat Goldthwait?
Because those rides are not 15-minute rides, people.
No, it's like
when you're coming home from a gig,
ride.
It's like 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. And you got those two guys in the car with you. Exactly. That's like an out of body experience when you're with those two guys.
It's like, I think you missed a turn.
You missed a turn. God damn it.
Imagine that.
Oh no, I can't imagine that. That would just be amazing. But I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as we did, because
we had a blast.
Yeah,
this was so much fun. This month is one of my favorite months.
Yes.
In all of the history of Behind the Funny.
Yes.
Because of the guests that we've been getting.
And I think the timing of Brian was perfect the week before Sean Maury.
Sean Maury. Yeah. We're so excited about next week. So I'm going to put up the rest of the month. If I can find the schedule somewhere.
Yeah,
somewhere up here.
Ace has got a lot of.
I got a lot of comments,
a lot of banners, and a lot of comments.
Well, hold on. So, what
do we got for comments going on here?
Don't forget the future head writer. Oh, future head writer for Conan was in the car too. Yeah, you're right, Jen. Besides Stephen Wright and
yeah, two legendary comedians. Bobcat
yeah.
became a amazing director and writer, and you got Stephen Wright, who's gotten an Oscar as well as this
Right.
amazing. And then you got the head writer of Conan,
who is actually I
got
put
an
up in
Emmy.
his bios. He's got Emmys.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
He's just amazing. He's such a nice guy. So before the show even started, we were talking to Brian, and he was like complimenting me. Like I was so honored by what he was saying.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we had a second to chat to him before the show started.
Yeah.
And the first thing he wanted to know is, where are you at in life? I haven't seen you in forever.
I know. And
he
what's
didn't want to talk
going
about
on?
himself. What's going on with you? How's the kids?
How's your kids? Yeah.
How's the
And
nothing to do with.
And even what he said, he was like, I always loved your act because it was so genuine.
It was important to you.
It was
he likes comedians whose act is important to them.
Right. Because he knew it was genuine.
Yes.
As a result.
Yes. And that's what I think one of the things that makes him such a good writer.
Right.
I love talking to writers, great writers.
So Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling, the channel said, great job, guys. Thank you, Tom. And Futured was funny, though. I think she meant future. But no, this was such a blast. We absolutely I'm so excited about what we've been
I know
doing
we're being
lately.
a dead horse, but
I can't help it. I'm sorry. I loved it. This was fantastic.
I hope you guys are having as much fun as we have, because if you love comedy, you love stand-up, you love the art of what this is, then these guests that we've had on recently are just amazing.
And some of the feedback that we've been getting in the 5-star reviews and stuff like that has kind of supplemented that and agreed with that. So I really appreciate it.
So, and continue to give us those 5-star reviews wherever you download your podcast. And we are everywhere. I could list them all for you right now, but we'd have to put another hour into this podcast. But we are literally everywhere where there are podcasts. You can download us, give us that 5-star written review, quick sentence. Love these guys. Love the guests. You don't even have to mention us, whatever it is. 5-star review. And at the end of June, we're going to take all those reviews, names in a hat. First show in July, we're going to pull out a name and give away a Behind the Funny live from the Aceman hoodie.
Yeah. And we're going to do that live on the
we're going to do that live on the air on Drinks, Jokes, letter N, Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling.
Yeah, exactly.
Twitch TV, Drinks, Jokes, and Storytelling, which is where you can watch the show after June.
Yeah. So for June, we've been putting up on Facebook just to try and pull people over and let them know that we are on Twitch. So just to reiterate, next week, we're so excited. We're going to have Sean Morey on. And then on 30th, we're going to have Wicked Funny Podcast on. Our friends Brian Bowden, Katie Arroyo, and Frank Gazzaro. It's going to be absolutely fun and funny. And we still don't even know if they're going to be in the studio, out of the studio. I know
doesn't matter.
I know Katie's on call for work, so she may be remote. But if we can get Brian and Frank in here, we'll have them in the studio.
But it doesn't even matter.
No, because they're going to be fucking crazy and fun all the time.
So it's going to be fun anyway.
Exactly. So, no, listen, folks, thanks so much for listening. We really, really appreciate it. Absolutely. And we hope to see you next week. And I ruined it, didn't I?
No, we can still.
All right. We'll still say it.
Other than that, we will talk to you
next week.